This is The Stand, Stephen King's post-apocalyptic dark fantasy masterpiece. It also just happens to be my favorite book of all time. A few months ago, I made a video on this channel claiming that this is the greatest book that I've ever read in my entire life. At least that's what I've been telling myself for the last 2 years. But after the release of that video and the thousands of comments that accompanied it, talking about how great The Stand was or how not great The Stand was, I've thought to myself recently, is it truly the greatest book that I've ever read? Or am I just saying that? 2 years ago, when I introduced this book on this channel, I read it in a feverish 48 hours. Granted, this book is 1,200 pages long, so I really don't know how I accomplished that in that amount of time. But over the years, I've thought, did I really give myself sufficient enough time to sink my teeth into this book and to really give it the test that it deserves? Or have I just been being delusional this whole time? Is this sprawling apocalyptic tale truly the modern classic that I thought it was? Deserving a place alongside the giants of the world's great literature? Or is it really just one long, pretty decent pulp story? Well, I'm gonna put it to the test. Disclaimer. Before we dive into anything, I do need to let you know that this will be spoiler-heavy content. I'm talking like spoilers the entire time. So if you're not wanting this book to be spoiled, go check out my other video, link down below in the description. Yeah, this is gonna be spoiler freaking heavy. At the end of it all, I'm going to be putting this book to the test to see whether or not this holds up to books like Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace, Alexander Dumas' The Count of Monte Cristo, Victor Hugo's Les Mis. You get the point. Now, some of you have already commented, absolutely heck freaking no, Stephen King does not compare to those writers. That's not for you to say. That's not even for me to say yet. We're going to let the content speak for itself. So without further ado, this is Stephen King's The Stand. Part 1 of The Stand opens with a catastrophic event. A highly contagious superflu known as Captain Trips escapes from a government facility. What follows is the swift, devastating collapse of society as more than 99.4% of humanity is wiped out. Now, the thing about this, the slow spread of this superflu feels eerily real. How rumors turn into panic, how institutions fail, and ultimately how individuals are left behind. Stephen King was almost ahead of his time when it came to this book because of how familiar it all feels as you're reading it, especially in a post-2020 world. But the thing is, King doesn't romanticize the end of the world, and instead, he makes us sit in the mess. As you read through the pages, you find families dead in cars, and radios still playing to empty rooms, and of course, corpses piling up in silence. But amid the chaos, King introduces us to a diverse cast of survivors, each isolated, each dealing with their own fears, flaws, and strengths as the world around them crumbles. This section of the novel is less about plot twists and really more about immersion. King is putting you right inside the slow motion horror of watching everything familiar pretty much disintegrate. And I think above it all, what makes the beginning of this book so powerful is that Stephen King isn't relying on spectacle. The apocalypse isn't some fiery explosion. It's a cough in a movie theater, a sneeze in a diner, a baby crying in an empty house. By the time the characters and the reader realize what's happening, it's already too late. I think of all the apocalyptic literature that I've read over the years, it's the beginning of this book that makes The Stand hit harder than most end-of-the-world novels. It's terrifying because, well, it feels possible. Let's introduce you to the characters. First is Stu Redman. He's a quiet, stoic man from Arnett, Texas. He's working class, he's completely unassuming, but he becomes one of the central moral pillars of the story. Stu is ordinary, and that's what makes him extraordinary. Next is Franny Goldsmith. Oh, dear sweet Franny. Franny's a young woman from Ogunquit, Maine, and she discovers she's pregnant just as the plague begins. Next is my man Larry Underwood. He's a rising rock musician from New York City. He's selfish and reckless. His arc is one of the best Stephen King's ever pulled off. Next is Nick Andros. Nick is a drifter wanderer who goes from town to town doing odd jobs, and when the plague hits, he finds himself in Shoyo, Arkansas as the makeshift sheriff. Oh, and what makes him interesting is that he's deaf and mute. So there's that. Oh gosh, next we meet Lloyd Henreid. Oh gosh. Lloyd is a petty criminal. We find him trapped in a jail cell when society collapses. Lloyd begins as kind of a loser, destined to die behind bars. But fate, or perhaps something more sinister, gives him a second chance, and he becomes one of the most important characters on the dark side of the board. The last character that we meet at the beginning, at least within the first part of this book, is Randall Flagg himself, the Dark Man. Flagg is introduced at the margins. He's introduced as a rumor, as whispers in the night, and at fleeting sightings. He's one of King's most prolific antagonists, if not his greatest antagonist he's ever written, not only just because of The Stand, but because of where he fits into the grand scheme of Stephen King's multiverse. This character is much more than what he seems in just this book. Yeah, he is quite something else. And finally, the last POV of book 1 is Mr. Harold Lauder. Harold is actually Franny's awkward neighbor. Yeah, he's from the same town as Franny. He's actually Franny's dead best friend's brother. And Harold is, well, he's something else. Harold is one of King's most fascinating characters. At first, he's sympathetic, intelligent, and determined. He soon becomes twisted by jealousy and bitterness until he becomes something completely unrecognizable to the reader. Yeah, we're gonna get to Harold. Oh man, he's just so misguided. Spoiler time. Well, there's really not much to spoil in book 1 because really not that much happens except a lot of people die. Key moments would be Stu's imprisonment in a secret government quarantine facility because he's a guinea pig to see why he's asymptomatic or why he's immune to the flu. Nick almost dies in a brutal bar fight just because he is mute and deaf. Lloyd gets in prison because, well, he gets caught at a petty robbery of a gas station. Really, we just see the harrowing deaths of millions described in painfully specific human detail. Yet even with all of that, it is still one of the best introductions to any book that I have ever read. No question about it. Time to relax and get some good reading done. Huh? What's that? Oh, this chair! Yes, it is new. Yes. Huh? Oh, where did I get it? Oh, why? From the sponsor of today's video, FlexiSpot. Let me introduce you to the FlexiSpot Lotus Recliner. That's right, the FlexiSpot Lotus Recliner. This spacious recliner provides ample space for various sitting activities. Sitting positions include upright, sideways, or even cross-legged. On top of being comfortable, this bad boy has flexible swivel and rocking mechanisms to offer the ultimate comfort and help you release stress like a warm embrace. That's right, it swivels 360 degrees, making it the ultimate comfort machine. And above all, it has perfect reclining so you can effortlessly extend your legs and recline, making it the ideal place to think, read a good book, and above all, take a short nap. And just when you thought it couldn't get any better, it has a perfectly concealed storage space on the side where you can store any item for later. Me, I use mine for books. Yes, isn't that stylish? And it even comes with a USB charging port. That is, of course, if you got the electrified version. And on top of all of that, this chair comes with a variety of additional features. If you want one of these bad boys for yourself, check it out by clicking the link down below in the description. And don't miss out on a sweet deal by using the code LOTUS30 to get $30 off plus free shipping. Thank you so much again to FlexiSpot for sponsoring today's video. I think it's time to cozy up in this bad boy and get back to reading the greatest book that I've ever read. Like all great stories, all great classics of literature, there's themes. And The Stand is no different. Earlier in the introduction when I said to see if I can compare this book to something like War and Peace or Count of Monte Cristo or Les Mis. Well, here's where I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try to take you through the themes that Stephen King builds as he goes. And one of those first major themes is the fragility of civilization. In most post-apocalyptic stories, it is all about the spectacle. It is about the chaos. And not to say that that doesn't happen in this story, but it all started with a cough and a sneeze. And thus began the collapse of civilization across the world. And we saw that, right? We saw that in 2020, how fragile things got, how insane things got. Stephen King does a great job of making us relive that all over again. What's interesting though about the whole catastrophe, Stephen King does a really good job of showing the character inside of the catastrophe. You know, it's not the disaster that changes people. The disaster actually reveals them, reveals who they really are. And we get to see a lot of these characters as they really are. They're not sugar-coated, they're not nice, they're not pretty. And the end of the world truly helps to show who some of us may or may not be when everything goes to crap. But it's not just the scale of this book, it's the depth of humanity that's revealed in the moments of terror that make this book a great book. But we're just getting started. Now, part 2 of The Stand shifts the story from survival to purpose. The plague is over, the world is dead silent, and now the survivors begin to dream. Some are having dreams of a benevolent elderly woman known as Abigail. They're being drawn in their subconscious to Nebraska. And others are pulled west to towards Las Vegas, where the man with no face, the walking dude, the dark man, Randall Flagg awaits. Truly, this middle part of the book is about choices. The world has ended, but what truly can replace it? And that is what every character in this book must answer. Or the beginning of this part of the book is so freaking fascinating because King uses dreams and visions almost like they're recruitment tools. Survivors are haunted by vivid messages, forced to choose between the light of Mother Abigail or the darkness of the Dark Man. And the binary between those two really isn't all that subtle. But still, King makes it powerful. Characters aren't just choosing where they're gonna go. Ultimately, the choice of where they want to go ends up revealing who they're choosing to become. Dreams in The Stand aren't just nighttime visions. They're truly destiny knocking at the door. Will the characters listen to the call of hope, or will they inevitably give in to the seductive promises of power? And it's that choice, which is more than the plague, more than the apocalypse itself. It's the true core of the novel.
Let's catch up with our characters.
It's the character development in book 2 that is just, so good. I think this is where King does his strongest character work. Not just because we get beginning and some of the really good results are some of our favorite characters already, but we get introduced to new characters. And the first of those is Mother Abigail. Mother Abigail, she's a 108-year-old, deeply religious woman who begins receiving visions. Mother Abigail is the counterweight to Flagg, the embodiment of faith, community, and resilience. She's kind of a prophet in this book. She's almost like a Moses. She's leading the people from the wilderness to a promised land, and she's just spectacular. Then we get to meet a guy named Trash Can. The Trash Can Man. Yes, that is his actual name. Trash Can Man is a pyromaniac, and we find him wandering the ruins of civilization, completely obsessed with fire. He's not evil in the way Flagg is, but he's just broken. He represents the dangerous, destructive urge within humanity to just simply burn everything down. And he's a ton of fun. And the final character that's introduced to us at the beginning of part 2 is Nadine Cross. She's introduced early as a teacher, or at least a former teacher before the plague hit. Nadine is haunted from the start. She's torn between salvation and damnation, embodying the novel's core question: do we truly have a choice in who we become? Nadine plays a very special role. As soon as she comes on the scene, yeah, we'll get to Nadine.
Spoiler time. Okay, first and foremost, book 2 has the scariest scene in the entire book, possibly one of the scariest scenes Stephen King has ever written. Larry Underwood and that freaking Lincoln Tunnel as he tries to escape New York City. Oh my gosh, what a scene. This is also the part of the book where several main POV characters start conglomerating together to travel across the United States. Eventually, everybody lands in one of two places, Las Vegas or Boulder. And what's really interesting is we see the formation of what's known as the Boulder Free Zone, with committees, debates, and attempts to rebuild society as a whole. And just when you think the dust from the plague settles, Mother Abigail, the beacon of hope, the prophet herself, disappears. Now, while all of this is going on, Nadine is succumbing to the seduction of Flagg's visions that he's sending her personally, despite Larry's attempts to save her or anybody else. She feels like she's personally promised to Flagg, and that leads her to do some very vile things. And once Nadine fully succumbs and sinks to the bottom, she finds Harold there. And together they come up with a plan to betray the Boulder Free Zone and slink away to Las Vegas to join Flagg. But before they go, they leave the committee one final departing gift, a bomb that inevitably ends up killing Nick Andros. Rest in peace, my deaf-mute homeboy. The deaths of a few committee members also coincide with the return of Mother Abigail from her sojourn in the desert, where she received a vision from God telling her that a few chosen men need to be sent to parlay to Las Vegas and make their final stand against the evil darkness that's amassing to destroy their very existence.
Now we come back to the themes. In the beginning of the book, you realize the fragility of civilization, the characters revealed of how who they really are is revealed when the end truly came, and of course the depth of humanity that this book is really, really good at showing. But what part 2 of this novel ultimately becomes is a discussion on free will versus destiny. And this is a debate as old as time. This book is quite biblical in its scope and approach to some of these themes. Stephen King honestly has captured this same debate of, are human beings truly free to choose for themselves, or have they been placed into the machine, and they're going to do these things no matter what because they're being influenced outside of themselves. It is crazy how in-depth Stephen King actually goes with this. A lot of people who discount Stephen King as one of the great writers of the 20th century and the 21st century, a lot of the people that don't want to admit that a book like this is truly a modern classic, is that they don't want to admit that he writes about really deep things. On one hand, yes, he writes about very scary things, and this may be one of his scariest books of all because it's so real and so close to home, but underneath the surface of the story, he's talking about something quite profound. What is actually up to them? Can they choose the path that they ultimately walk, or are they destined to go on certain paths regardless of their choices? That is what part 2 starts to really dig into. And by the end of book 2, we're seeing the birth of new societies. On one hand, we see Boulder, this re-emerging democracy from the ashes, and then we see Las Vegas as this dictatorship, pretty much. Within the scope of Vegas, we see the seductive simplicity of evil. That is a deep-rooted theme of this novel, particularly explored through the character of Randall Flagg himself. There's so much to be said about Flagg, but Flagg promises order, but he demands submission. A lot of people think that, oh, evil is just chaos. There is a form of evil that is chaotic. You see that in all apocalyptic literature. You see that even in the apocalyptic literature of the Bible. By the end of the section of this novel, we see the corruptibility of good intentions. Just like in characters like Harold and Nadine, we see the good intentions of both of these characters corrupted. For instance, with Harold, he sinks deeper and deeper into resentment, and Nadine sinks deeper and deeper into despair. No matter the amount of good choices, no matter the amount of good intentions, they ultimately end up corrupted. When someone like Harold, he's wasted potential. He was too arrogant, he was too full of himself to allow any sort of compassion and true good nature to compel him to do things out of righteous intention. Instead, he always did it out of personal gain. That was why he was able to sink so deep into his resentment that he was ultimately led to commit a very heinous act against people that took him in and accepted him. Part 3 of The Stand is where everything comes together. The survivors in Boulder, shaken but resolute, realize that the battle isn't just for survival anymore. It's for the heart and soul of the new world. 4 men are chosen to journey west, to make their final stand against Randall Flagg. What follows is a journey of sacrifice, confrontation, and fate. This is the section where King transforms his sprawling epic into a spiritual parable. It's less about armies clashing and more about the nature of good, evil, and destiny itself.
Spoiler time. Oh man, Stu, Larry, Glenn, and Ralph all sojourn west to go to Las Vegas. On their way there, Stu has a really nasty fall and breaks his leg, and they have to leave him for dead. Reading that terrible line of, "They never saw Stu Redman again," was so heart-wrenching. But I'm not going to spoil what happens after that because Stephen King gives you something so sweet. Anywho, the other 3 guys get captured by Flagg's men, they get imprisoned, Glenn gets killed, and then Larry and Ralph are humiliated publicly on crucifixes. But luckily for them, Trash Can Man arrives back from his journey in the desert that Flagg sent him on, and guess what he has trailing behind him? That's right, you guessed it. A nuclear bomb. And of course that mother trucker gets detonated. Of course. What did you think would happen? You think just carrying around a nuclear bomb and it wouldn't just go off? Come on. But in the end, Flagg's empire in Las Vegas ends in a burning ball of fire. Now, of course, that's not the actual ending. There is an ending after that climax, and I'm just going to leave that for all of those who want to read that for themselves because I don't want to ruin that. It's quite beautiful, possibly one of Stephen King's best. Now the themes. The themes we've been building, right? At the end of the second part of this book, Stephen King has taken us on a journey of free will versus destiny or fate. We've seen the birth of new societies. We see the seductive simplicity of evil and the promises of Randall Flagg. And we see the corruptibility of the good intentions of some of our characters. But the key themes that we see throughout the last and final epic part of this book, that sacrifice is ultimately the price of goodness. That is a theme that's reflected over and over again. The price of what it means to be a good person is sacrifice. Sacrifice to self, sacrifice to your desires, sacrifice to your needs and your wants, and placing everybody else's needs and wants above yourself. We see that in characters like Stu, Franny, and particularly we see that in the character of Larry. What
a freaking character arc we see in Larry Underwood. Another theme that's brilliantly displayed is the instability of evil. Evil cannot create, it can only destroy, and we see that. The grip that Flag has, it implodes in on itself. The things that he thinks has been built up, the things that the people in Las Vegas believe, it can all be taken away in a second. There's also this really deep freaking debate between faith and nihilism, and that's seen through these two communities, what the two kinds of people choose to believe, especially those that followed Mother Abigail and those that followed Flag. Juxtaposition between what it looks like to be a faithful person and what it looks like to be a nihilistic person, and the consequences, good and bad, of both of those things. Truly mind-blowing how he did that with just characters. I think the thing that sets a book like this apart from, like, say, other masterful works of fiction, like, I love The Count of Monte Cristo, but there are moments where Alexander Dumas will go on a philosophical tangent to show something like that, to show this juxtaposition between faith and nihilism. Or the same thing in The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky, or even Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. He will take a break from the plot and the character development in the world, and he will give you this long-winded philosophical treatise. I think the brilliance of Stephen King is in the simplicity. I think that's where a lot of people want to judge his writing and want to say that I'm stupid for reading it, that you're stupid for reading it. I think that's also why a lot of people say an author like Stephen King could ever write a classic. But that's just not true, because he's hitting home these incredible themes that are explored in some of the greatest books ever written, but he's doing it in such a simple way. He's not distracting you from the plot or the characters to take you aside and give you this long-winded exposition of what he thinks philosophically. You just explore this naturally through characters, their decisions, their actions, the scenes that they're set in, the dialogue between them, the internal dialogue that they have with themselves. It is brilliant. At the end of the book, part 3 really kind of drives home the question of, can humanity do better next time? A lot of these characters realize this was our do-over. We, the survivors, are the ones that were given this last and final chance to do better. Not to be perfect, because that'll never happen, but to do better. So, does The Stand hold up to its reputation as the greatest book that I've ever read? On one level, yes. It's sprawling, terrifying, intimate, and completely unforgettable. It contains multitudes: horror, fantasy, drama, even theology. But on another level, I don't think its greatness comes from its size or its scope. I think its greatness comes from how deeply it believes in humanity. This is a story about faith in humankind, in our flaws, in our resilience, in our capacity for both destruction and renewal. Maybe that's why this book will be praised for a very long time. Not just a story about the end of the world, but a story about who people are when the world ends. And I took my time with it. It took me almost 5 weeks to read this book, and it felt like the first time all over again. I love this book so much, and I still consider it the greatest book that I've ever read, because even a lot of the classics that I've read, even a lot of the great epic stories that I have on my top 10 greatest books, this book still takes the cake, because, well, you just saw an entire video of why. And I think that's why everybody should give it a shot. I hope I've given any of you a reason to do so, spoilers or no spoilers. So that's it. That was Stephen King's The Stand. And again, if you're interested in the FlexiSpot Lotus Recliner, check it out by clicking the link down below. Use my exclusive code LOTUS30 to get $30 off, plus free shipping. Thank you so much again to FlexiSpot for sponsoring today's video. I'll catch you in the next one. I know there's gonna be some of you that come in the comments and go, hey Ian, if you like The Stand, you should read Robert McCammon's Swan Song. Oh, would you look at that? I already have a copy. Oh, would you also look at that? I've already read it. Most of you on this channel know my opinion on this book. I liked it. I liked it very, very much. But guess what? I don't like it nearly as much as The Stand, but to make you feel better and to make me feel better, if you'll do me this one solid, just comment down below, hey Ian, if you like The Stand, you should read Robert McCammon's Swan Song. Go ahead. I'll give you time. Okay, that's awesome. Thank you so much. I'll catch you in the next one.